It began with roses on the table. It ended with fear behind closed doors. She thought forever meant safety, but forever became a cage. Promises turned into bruises. Love turned into silence. And every day she wondered how much more of herself she could lose before she disappeared completely. This is the story of how one woman broke the cycle that tried to own her, and why walking away was the most dangerous and the most powerful choice she ever made. Welcome, family, to Mr. Hearthline Stories. Tell us where in the world you're watching from, because this family reaches across every border. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, because these stories remind us, strength lives where fear once stood. Let's begin. The first time she saw him, she was running late. The elevator doors had just closed when her phone buzzed with a calendar reminder she didn't need. Rooftop Mixer Goldstein Fund event. 7 p.m. She was already at 7:12, breathless, fingers adjusting the strap on her heel as she stepped into the lobby. It was the kind of place where success floated in the air like perfume. Everyone smiled too wide and held champagne like they'd rehearsed. She had only been back in Chicago for 4 months, still getting used to wearing business casual and being called Ms. Thomas in email signatures. Tonight was supposed to be for connections, grant sponsors, potential mentors, maybe a job lead or two. But the moment she stepped onto the rooftop, all of that paused. He was there, near the far end of the deck, standing in profile under string lights, holding court. Without effort. He didn't shout. He didn't perform. Yet people leaned in when he spoke. Their eyes met like a coincidence, but it didn't feel like one. He crossed the distance before she could talk herself into leaving. Late to the party, he said, with a half smile. Or just stylishly disinterested? She laughed before she meant to. Lost track of time. I'm Chad. He extended a hand, firm and warm. Amara. He repeated it once, softly. Amara. That's not a name you forget. The conversation felt easy. Too easy. They talked about public funding gaps, leadership, seminars, how she hated small talk but loved open bars. He complimented her mind before her dress, which somehow made both feel sincere. An hour passed like minutes. When she checked her phone again, her Lyft app had closed itself. He noticed. Let me walk you to your car. You don't have to. I want to. He handed her his jacket when the wind rose. It smelled expensive and clean, like someone who never rushed but always arrived. She told him that, and he smiled like it was a compliment he hadn't earned yet. As they reached the parking garage, he stopped. You know, he said, most people say the same things at events like these. I'm different, because... He waved a hand. But you don't sound rehearsed. I like that. She hesitated. I'm not trying to impress anyone. That's probably why you do. The goodbye lingered. He didn't ask for her number. He just let her go with a promise. If our paths cross again, I won't be a stranger. She drove home in silence, jacket still on her shoulders. The next day, a flower delivery waited at her office desk. A single white tulip in a narrow vase. No note, no sender. But she already knew. The flowers didn't stop after that. A different arrangement each week. Always on Wednesdays. Always at 9:15 a.m. He never made a big deal about it. Just sent a follow-up text after each one. Hope your morning's better now. It became their rhythm. Brunch on Saturdays. Long drives through the outer edges of the city. Nights spent laughing on his balcony. Both of them barefoot. Sharing stories neither had told anyone else in years. She told him about her mother, how she stayed in a house too long, loved a man who only knew how to hurt. He didn't flinch. That's not your story, he said gently. And that won't be mine. He told her about the business he was building. A tech platform, something to do with simplifying back-end systems for hospitals. It was over her head, but the way he talked about it made it feel like art. When she got a new job offer, he took her out to celebrate. Candles, jazz, a handwritten note. On the menu, to new doors, not old ceilings. She was used to surviving, not shining. But he saw something in her, and that seeing made her believe she could be more. He kept his apartment spotless, always had good wine, never raised his voice. When she got anxious about their pace, the weekend bags she started leaving there, the drawer he cleared. For her, he laughed. Relax. There's no test. Just stay if it feels good. And it did. She started sleeping through the night again. Stopped triple-checking every message before she sent it. Laughed like her shoulders didn't remember how to hold up a wall. When she introduced him to her mom, he brought a bouquet wrapped in linen and hugged her, like he'd known her for years. He treats you like a jewel, her mother whispered in the kitchen. Maybe your story really is different. Felt like it. Felt safe. One Sunday morning, curled up in his hoodie, she asked, "What are we doing? I mean, where is this going?" He looked at her, unblinking. "Forever. That's where it's going." She blinked back tears. Not because she didn't believe him, but because she did. He made her tea when she had cramps. Ran her baths when she was stressed. Held her hand. In public like it was an extension of his body. And when he whispered "I love you," it didn't sound rehearsed. It sounded like the only thing he'd been waiting to say since they met. She let him in fully after that. No guard. No mask. No hesitation. He wasn't perfect. But he was hers. And she thought finally she was his. He woke up early, always before her. By the time sunlight touched the apartment's edges, he had already brewed the coffee, checked emails, and mentally gone through his pitch deck 3 times. He wasn't just building a company. He was building an empire. And in his world, success wasn't optional. It was oxygen. He never said it out loud, but he wore pressure like a second skin. Growing up in a house where being average got you punished, he'd learned to keep his shoulders square, jaw tight, and emotions buried. His father didn't believe in softness. Don't cry. Win. That was the mantra. And Chad won. Repeatedly. Scholarships. Accelerated programs. 2 startups before the age of 30. He dressed for outcomes, not impressions. But beneath the tailored clothes and market updates was a man terrified of failure. Not just the kind that cost money, the kind that made people walk away. He'd seen his mother walk out. Once. Slammed door. Suitcase. Gone. She'd been the only softness he knew. And when she left, softness went with her. So he kept people close by making himself essential. Useful. Charismatic. Needed. He didn't like not knowing things. If Amara took too long to respond to a text, his stomach tightened. If she laughed at someone else's joke in public, he'd feel heat rise in his chest. If she made decisions without checking in first, he noticed and remembered. He didn't yell. He didn't threaten. He just corrected subtly, controlled the flow. If she wore a dress that hugged too tightly, he'd say, "That's bold for brunch, don't you think?" If she mentioned an ex-colleague he didn't like, he'd say, "Why are you still giving people like that space in your life?" He wrapped every critique in charm. His tone stayed light, but his eyes would harden, just for a second. She noticed, but she didn't pull away, and that only confirmed what he believed. Love was a matter of maintenance. You just had to tighten the bolts before things fell apart. The more he gave her, the more he expected in return. Dinner plans were to be kept. Loyalty wasn't to be tested. Her time belonged to them now. That was the natural order. And still he loved her. He meant it when he kissed her temple in the morning and said, "You make me better." He meant it when he bought her a new laptop because she'd mentioned her old one ran slow. He meant it when he looked at her and thought, "She's not like anyone else." But even as he planned their future, the condo downtown, the nonprofit she wanted to start, the child they'd maybe have one day, a quiet, unspoken rule pulsed under it all. She would never leave, because he had built her world too, and everything she loved now lived inside him. She started dressing differently, not because he asked. He never had to ask. A simple glance, a pause too long on a short hemline, or a raised brow when she chose red lipstick, those were enough. "You wore that to the office?" he said once, motioning to her blouse, his tone calm but pointed. She folded the fabric between her fingers and shrugged. "It's just navy." "Yeah, but still." You know how men are. He said it like he was protecting her. Like he was shielding her from eyes he couldn't trust. And maybe that's what made it confusing. He never said, "You can't." He just made her feel like she shouldn't. Over time, she stopped debating it. The same way she stopped staying late at work. Dinner's at 7. You'll be home, right? First, it felt sweet. He wanted her there. He missed her. That mattered, didn't it? But soon, it was no longer a question. He stopped saying "I miss you" and started asking why. "Weren't you answering your phone?" One night, she walked in 15 minutes past 7. Traffic. A late client call. The food was cold. He didn't raise his voice. He just scraped his chair back and stood, arms crossed. "If this startup matters more than us, let me know now." She hated how her throat tightened. "It doesn't." "Then act like it." She stared at him. A man who once kissed her hand in grocery aisles now made her feel like a child late for curfew. That night, she set her alarm earlier than usual. Not because of work. Because she wanted to make sure his coffee was ready before he woke. The next morning, he kissed her cheek and said, "That's my girl." And somehow those four words made her want to cry. She tried to talk to her friend Nia about it once. He likes things a certain way. I don't mind adjusting. It's not like he's controlling. Nia blinked. "You're justifying things that don't need to be justified, Amara." "I'm just saying he's under a lot of pressure. And he still makes time for me. You're allowed to exist without needing a permission slip." Amara laughed. "You're being dramatic." But later that night, she stood in front of the mirror, turning sideways, checking her neckline. Twice before walking out of the bedroom. The isolation wasn't loud. It didn't march in like a threat. It seeped through the cracks of her. Routines slow, patient, sure. Brunches with her girlfriends happened less often. Family calls turned shorter. She started every conversation with "I can't stay long." She didn't notice how often she said sorry. Didn't notice how her hand paused over the phone before texting back. Didn't notice how she stopped dancing to music in the kitchen when she cooked. Until one day, she looked at her reflection and whispered, "You're disappearing." Then, as if catching herself, she added quickly, "But that's love, right? Compromise." And compromise, in her mind, still felt better than chaos. So she stayed. Not because she was afraid yet, but because she didn't want to believe what was beginning. The argument started over takeout. She had ordered Thai instead of sushi. He had said sushi earlier, but she was craving something warm, something spiced, something that reminded her of the comfort she hadn't felt in weeks. When he opened the bag and saw the containers, his expression stiffened. "I said sushi." "You did. But I figured, maybe a little change." He dropped the bag on the counter. "You don't listen, Amara. That's the problem." She blinked. "It's just dinner." He stepped closer. Not with force. With focus. "No. It's another decision you made without me. Another reminder that what I say doesn't matter." Her voice stayed low. "I didn't mean it like that." He scoffed. "You never do." She turned toward the sink, needing space. The room felt smaller than it had 10 minutes ago. She wasn't crying, but her throat ached with something thicker than air. He reached for her arm. Not roughly, not with rage, but with control. "Don't walk away when I'm talking to you." She stopped cold. His hand stayed clamped just below her elbow. The grip was firm. Not violent. Not bruising. But unmistakably clear. His voice didn't rise, but it dropped an octave. "I don't like repeating myself." She turned slowly, her eyes searching his face for the man who once traced her collarbone, and whispered, "You're my peace." All she saw now was pride. Ego. Fragile dominance holding on for dear life. "You're hurting me," she said quietly. His fingers loosened. He let go fast. Stepped back even faster. "Damn it," he muttered, running a hand over his mouth. "I didn't mean, Amara. I swear. I didn't mean to do that." She rubbed her arm and said nothing. You make me feel like I'm losing you. And when I lose control of things, I get angry?" she asked, voice barely audible. Scared, he corrected. I get scared. He dropped to the couch, head in his hands. I need you. You ground me. I'm not myself without you. And somehow the apology made it worse. That night he brought home flowers. The same kind he gave her when they first met. He cooked dinner, her favorite. Played her playlist while they ate. Said all the right things in all the right tones. And when they sat curled up on the couch, her head resting against his shoulder, she wanted to believe it had just been a mistake. A stress response. A rare moment. But when she went to the bathroom and peeled her cardigan off, faint red marks were still there. Thin, almost invisible, but real. She touched the skin gently, and for the first time in months, remembered her mother's forearms. After washing dishes, covered in makeup just above the wrist. It's not the same, she told herself. It's not the same. But her reflection didn't believe her. She had always been good at adjusting. As a child, she learned to measure her steps based on her father's tone. If the hallway creaked too loud when he was on the phone, her mother would flinch. So Amara stopped using the hallway after 8 p.m. entirely. By age 10, she had memorized how to clean blood out of fabric. By 15, she knew how to read between her mother's silences. And by 20, she promised herself that when she loved, it would be different. But the body remembers patterns before the mind does. And lately, her body had started waking before dawn. Chest tight, breath shallow. She'd sit up, in bed next to Chad's sleeping figure and watch the ceiling, heart racing without a sound to chase it. She wasn't afraid. Not yet. She told herself that. But there was a heaviness she couldn't explain. She had stopped journaling. It used to be her refuge. Pages filled with dreams, affirmations, scraps of poetry she never shared. But now even her journal stared back blank. The pen paused too often. The words came out confused. One morning, after Chad left for a meeting, she pulled the leather-bound notebook from beneath the bed and opened it to a clean page. The ink bled slowly from her pen. I don't know when I stopped laughing from my belly. I still smile, still show up, still get compliments on my clothes and my work and my skin. But something in me is shrinking, like I'm apologizing for existing too loudly. I haven't danced in my kitchen in 3 months. I haven't told Nia the truth. I haven't told myself the truth either. But I remember what Mom used to say when she thought I was asleep. Maybe next time it won't be so bad. I swore I'd never be her. She closed the journal. Then she hid it beneath her jeans at the bottom of the dresser. Later that day, Serena stopped by. Chad's sister, always bright, always sharp, always catching things no one else did. They sat across from each other in the living room, tea between them. Amara reached for the cup with the same wrist Chad had gripped the night before. Serena's eyes landed on it. Didn't linger but didn't skip past it either. You good? She asked gently. Yeah, just a long week. Serena stirred her tea. You know, you don't have to pretend with me. Amara's voice barely rose. It was just an argument. Nothing serious. Serena didn't push. She just nodded, sipped her drink and said, My brother can be intense. There was a beat of silence. Then another. Amara set her cup down and folded her hands. I'm not my mother. You're not, Serena said. But even strong women can forget how far they've bent until something breaks. The words stayed in the room long after Serena left. That night, Amara climbed into bed slowly, curling onto her side with her back to Chad. She stared at the wall and whispered to herself, like a prayer she didn't yet believe. She stayed. I won't. The rain came down soft that morning. Not harsh, not dramatic, just enough to make the pavement glisten and the air feel honest. Amara hadn't planned to be out long. She'd only meant to pick up a book she'd placed on hold. A quiet errand. Quiet day. She didn't see him at first. The bell above the bookstore door jingled as she stepped inside, pulling her coat tighter. The smell of paper and coffee grounded her. She wasn't sure why her hands trembled lately, even during peaceful moments, but the smell steadied her. She turned the corner toward the counter, and that's when she saw him. He was taller now, broader, but his eyes hadn't changed. Isaiah. He looked up from a paperback, did a double take, then smiled in slow recognition. Amara? His voice still had that calm in it, that Sunday morning warmth. She blinked. Isaiah Bell? He set the book down and stepped forward. I was just thinking about your brother the other day. Remember when we used to race bikes down your block? She laughed, breathless. You always cheated. I just didn't like losing. Their hug was tentative. A pause of years pressed between them, but familiar. How long has it been? He asked. 10? Maybe 12 years. And yet you still look exactly the same. She rolled her eyes. Liar. He shrugged, playful. Architects never lie. We just exaggerate for effect. They ended up walking to the cafe next door. A quiet booth, 2 mugs of coffee, and a flood of old memories. He told her he'd spent the last few years in Atlanta, teaching at a design school. But Chicago's home, he said, always was. She didn't talk much about her life. Not about Chad. Not about the walls closing in. She gave him the surface. Her job, her new place, her love for long walks near the lake. But Isaiah noticed things. He always had. Are you happy? He asked gently. She stirred her coffee longer than necessary. I'm managing. He didn't press. Just nodded like he understood the language behind the words. Outside, the rain softened to mist. They sat in silence for a moment. Do you still write poetry? He asked. Her smile faded a little. Not lately. You used to write stuff that made people cry. I used to believe in softer things. He looked at her, eyes kind but searching. You don't anymore? She hesitated. I'm learning. He offered a small smile. Then I hope I get to read your new stuff someday. As they stood to leave, he reached for her umbrella. An old habit. He opened it over both of them and walked her to her car. Before she got in, he touched her wrist lightly. Not the bruised one, the other. If you ever get lost again, he said softly, I'll find you. And somehow that promise, said in the rain under a black umbrella, after 12 quiet years, felt more real than the ones she'd heard whispered beside her pillow at home. The next time they met, it wasn't by accident. Isaiah sent a short message 2 days after their rainy bookstore encounter. Simple, careful. No pressure, but I'm trying a new espresso spot in Hyde Park. Be good to catch up again. Saturday? Amara stared at the message longer than she meant to. She didn't ask Chad. She didn't lie either. She just went. The cafe was quiet, with mismatched chairs and local art on the walls. Isaiah sat by the window, a book open beside his untouched drink. He stood when he saw her, that same calm energy radiating from his posture. You came, he said, not surprised, just quietly pleased. I owed you a coffee, she replied. They talked for hours. He told her about his late grandmother, the one who raised him, the one who used to leave notes in his lunchbox that said, Your voice matters. Use it kindly. She told him about her nonprofit dreams, the ones she had buried under meetings and tight schedules. Why'd you stop chasing that? He asked. She shrugged. Chad says maybe later, that we need to focus on more practical goals first. Isaiah raised an eyebrow. You used to be the most stubborn girl on our block. You once organized a toy drive at age 9 and convinced the pastor to let you speak in front of the whole church. She chuckled. I forgot about that. Don't. There was a warmth in the space between them. Not flirtation. Not even longing. Just the gentle memory of who she was before the world got heavy. She didn't tell him about the bruises. She didn't tell him about the nights she cried into the bathroom sink so Chad wouldn't hear. But Isaiah noticed the way she folded into herself when asked how she'd been. He noticed how she flinched slightly when a nearby couple raised their voices. He didn't ask questions she wasn't ready to answer, but he listened to what her silences said. As they stood outside after their coffee, a breeze passed through the block. Her coat didn't close. All the way, without hesitation, Isaiah reached out and buttoned it. Amara froze. Not because it startled her, but because of how unfamiliar it felt to be touched without tension. She looked up at him. "Thank you. For the coat or the coffee? For remembering who I was," she said. He didn't respond, just looked at her like he saw the parts of her she had forgotten how to protect. That night, back at home, she sat in the dim light of the kitchen, eating leftover soup in silence. Chad was still out. Another meeting, another drink with a potential investor. Her phone buzzed. Isaiah had sent a picture. A grainy photo from their childhood. Her, missing a front tooth, smiling beside a crooked bike. Him covered in grass stains, holding up a trophy made from duct tape and soda cans. The caption read, "We were always better when things weren't perfect." She put the phone down, blinked away tears she hadn't felt coming, and whispered into the quiet, "I remember her." Isaiah had always preferred quiet places. Even as a child, he'd find comfort in things other boys ignored, like watching birds from the porch steps or tracing patterns in his grandmother's quilt while the neighborhood played tag. Outside, he wasn't soft. He just saw things other people didn't. It's why architecture fit him. It wasn't just about lines and buildings, it was about structure, weight, space, what to hold, what to carry, what to let go. That's how he looked at people too. After losing his grandmother, he'd packed his life into 2 suitcases and left Chicago. Spent years learning design, teaching, and avoiding anything that reminded him of loss. But Chicago had a heartbeat he couldn't shake. And coming back had brought everything into sharp focus, including Amara. He hadn't expected her to still live in the city. Hadn't expected the feeling that hit his chest when he saw her that day in the bookstore. She had changed, of course, but not her eyes, not her voice. There was a tightness in the way she spoke now, a guarded edge that hadn't been there before. She didn't need to say what was happening. He had seen that look before, in his aunt's face after she left her husband. The way someone walks through life quietly, trying not to be noticed or blamed. That look doesn't lie. Back in his apartment, Isaiah pulled out an old photo album. Not one filled with scenic views or school photos, but sketches. On the last page, there was a drawing he'd done when they were kids, her face in pencil, young and laughing, a crown of dandelions over her head. He remembered how mad she got when he made her sit still for 10 minutes while he drew it. "Don't you dare show anyone," she'd said, but smiled the entire time. He stared at the drawing now, feeling the ache of time. She had been his first real friendship. And maybe, if life had worked differently, something more. But he wasn't here to win her. He wasn't here to fix her. He just wanted her to remember who she was before everything asked her to shrink. The next morning, he stood in front of his class at the university and stared at the whiteboard. Today's lesson was supposed to be about foundational load-bearing. Instead, he began the lecture with a question. How many of you have ever been in a building that felt too heavy? A few students raised their hands. Not structurally, he added. Emotionally. More hands. A pause. A silence. He continued. Architecture isn't just about what can hold weight. It's about what should never have to. After class, he stepped into his office and pulled out his notebook. At the top of a clean page, he wrote, Amara. Load-bearing. He didn't know what the future would be between them, but he knew this much. She had carried enough, and if she ever reached out again, he'd be there. Not to rebuild her, but to remind her she didn't have to do it alone. The box sat on the bathroom counter like it had been waiting longer than she had. She hadn't told anyone. Not Nia, not Serena, not even the quiet voice inside her that had started speaking again lately. She stared at the words early result printed on the packaging. Her palms were damp. Her breath was shallow. It felt surreal that something so life-altering could fit inside a plastic stick. The digital screen blinked. She paced while it loaded, counted her steps, counted her heartbeats, counted how many times Chad had called her his whole future. And then the screen stopped blinking. Pregnant. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She didn't even sit down. She just stood still. Everything inside her went quiet. Not numb, not thrilled. just silent in a way that felt deeper than shock. She pressed a hand to her stomach and whispered, "Hey, baby." Felt too early to call it that, but it also felt too sacred not to. When Chad came home that evening, she'd already played out 20 versions of the conversation in her head. In some, he kissed her stomach. In others, he paced, then came around. In one fantasy version, he actually cried. But the real one, it didn't follow any script. "I have news," she said. He loosened his tie. "Good or bad?" She handed him the test. He stared at it, said nothing for several seconds. Then, "Now." Her heart dropped. He set the test on the table like it was a receipt. "We've got the Dixon meeting next week. And the Venture One contract isn't even finalized. This is not the time." She blinked. "It wasn't a plan. I assumed you were still on something." "I am. I don't know, things fail." He didn't move, didn't touch her, didn't ask if she was okay. He just muttered, "Then get rid of it." The room thudded with silence. She took a step back. "What? You heard me. I'm not terminating this pregnancy." He scoffed. "So you're just going to derail everything because of a mistake?" "A mistake." His eyes narrowed. "We're not ready." Her voice broke. "You're not ready." He threw his hands up. "This is exactly why I need structure, Amara. I can't afford surprises like this right now." She turned away. But before she reached the hallway, she heard him say, quieter but sharper, "Don't try to guilt me into something I didn't sign up for." She curled up on the bathroom floor later that night, knees drawn to her chest, phone buzzing. From Isaiah's unread message, "Just checking in. You crossed my mind today." Her hands covered her stomach. Her body shook with tears that came from a place she didn't even know existed. She wasn't afraid of being a mother. She was afraid of becoming one while losing herself completely. Still, between sobs, she whispered it like a promise she wasn't ready to break. "I'll protect you. I don't care what it costs." And somewhere in that dark bathroom, on cold tile and trembling breath, a different kind of strength was born. He didn't bring it up the next morning. Not once. Not over breakfast, not when he adjusted his tie in the hallway mirror, not when he kissed the top of her head with the same hand that had motioned for her to get rid of it the night before. She watched him carefully, hoping to find some sign that he'd thought it over, that maybe the fear in his eyes had softened into something human. But all she saw was calculation, like he'd boxed up the conversation, sealed it tight, and stored it in a corner of the closet where inconvenient truths go to die. "Need anything while I'm out?" he asked as he grabbed his keys. She shook her head. He left without another word. The apartment felt quieter than usual that day. Amara sat at the kitchen table, the test still in the drawer beneath her hand. Her phone buzzed. Occasionally, notifications she didn't open. Somewhere on her to-do list, groceries needed to be bought. Emails needed to be returned. But none of it mattered more than the ache she felt rising in her chest. Not grief, not yet. More like recognition. She had seen this before. In her mother's eyes. In the way her mother would smooth her dress before guests came over, hiding fresh pain behind pressed linen and polite smiles. In the way she'd brush Amara's hair before school like nothing was wrong, as if love required sacrifice and silence, not safety. Amara walked to the mirror in the bedroom and stared at herself. Her hands cradled her belly. Without thinking, a child would grow here, and that child would feel every choice she made from this moment on. Later that evening, Chad came home early. He brought dinner, her favorite red curry from that tiny place on Wabash she used to beg him to try. She looked at the containers and didn't touch them. "I thought maybe we should start over," he said. She met his eyes. "What does that mean?" "It means I overreacted. I've had time to think." She folded her arms. And maybe there's a way to figure this out together." He sat down across from her. The smell of coconut and chili filled the room, but she felt nauseated. "I'm not getting rid of the baby," she said plainly. Chad's jaw flexed. "I didn't say you had to. I need time to wrap my head around it. It's been time, Chad. You gave me silence, then dinner. But you never once asked if I was okay. He exhaled slowly. I'm trying here, Amara. No. You're trying to control the narrative. He leaned forward. I built a life for us. Everything I've done was to give you something better. She held his stare. But it's not better if I have to disappear inside it. There was a long pause. Then he leaned back, arms crossed. You know what? Maybe I'm not the problem here. Maybe you're just too sensitive. You've always been emotional. Something inside her cracked. Not with noise, but with clarity. She rose from the table and walked into the bedroom, locking the door behind her. From the other side, his voice followed, tired now. This is what you do. You shut down instead of communicating. But she wasn't shutting down. She was waking up. She sat on the bed in the dark, hand resting on her stomach again. The shape hadn't changed. But the weight of it had. She whispered softly, I don't need him to be ready. I just need you to be safe. And in the darkness, she allowed herself something she hadn't in weeks. Hope. Not in Chad. Not in a fairy tale. But in herself. Serena showed up unannounced on a Tuesday afternoon, holding a brown paper bag with lemon ginger tea and fresh strawberries. I figured you forgot to eat again, she said as Amara opened the door. Amara stepped aside wordlessly, letting her in. Her stomach was still turning from the night before. Chad had barely spoken to her since their quiet standoff, only moving around her like she was a piece of furniture in his perfectly arranged life. Serena placed the bag on the counter and took a long look at her. You look like someone's holding your joy hostage. Amara forced a smile. I'm fine. No, you're not. And I'm tired of pretending I don't see it. They sat in the living room, the quiet buzzing between them. Amara stared at her hands in her lap. Serena stared at her face. How far along are you? The question stunned her. Amara blinked. How did you? I'm not blind. You've been drinking only water. You touch your stomach when you think no one's watching. And you've been quieter, sadder. I know that look. Amara's throat tightened. I'm about 7 weeks. Serena leaned back and let out a breath. And he told you to end it? There was no accusation in her tone. Just the kind of knowing that comes from history. Amara didn't answer directly. Serena continued. You know, when we were little, I used to think Chad was magic. Like truly. He could talk anyone into anything. Teachers, girls, even my dad. Amara nodded. But you? Serena leaned forward, her voice soft but certain. You're the first person who ever made him look like he wanted to be better. Amara's eyes filled. But wanting isn't enough, Serena added. And you don't have to keep bleeding to prove your love works. The silence in the room shifted. It wasn't heavy, it was real. Amara exhaled. I keep hoping he'll change. I know. We all do. But hope shouldn't hurt this much. They walked through the nursery section of a nearby store later that evening, Serena's idea. You don't have to buy anything. Just dream out loud again, she said. Amara hesitated at first, but found herself reaching for a soft yellow onesie, running her fingers across the tiny buttons. I used to imagine a book corner in the nursery, she whispered. Not just picture books, poetry, stories I never got read to me. Serena smiled. Sounds like your baby's gonna have the most poetic bedtime. They lingered in front of a mobile with stars and clouds. Amara watched it spin slowly, light, catching the threads. I want them to feel safe. Every minute. Even when I'm not in the room. Serena nodded. Then start by showing them what strength looks like. Later that night, Amara sat alone again, but differently this time. She picked up her journal. I'm still scared, but fear doesn't own me. Not anymore. You are growing inside someone who's finally waking up. Not perfect, not fearless, but willing. And sometimes willing is enough to begin. She closed the journal and placed her hand over her stomach. I'm not doing this alone, she whispered. And somewhere, deep beneath that whisper, was the beginning of a new kind of roar. The message was harmless. Just passed by the old park today. Still remember when you dared me to jump the fence and I broke my tooth. You laughed for 5 minutes straight. I still owe you for that. Isaiah. Amara smiled faintly at her phone. She didn't reply. She didn't need to. The memory had already lifted her, just enough to breathe easier for a moment. The phone lit up again. This time it was Chad. 9:41 p.m. What's this? Attached was a screenshot. Isaiah's text. Her stomach dropped. She hadn't realized Chad had picked up her phone earlier when it buzzed in the kitchen. She'd been folding laundry in the bedroom. Just 5 minutes unattended, but long enough. The bedroom door creaked open. He walked in, holding the phone, his face unreadable. Who's Isaiah? Her voice caught. He's an old friend. From childhood. His eyes narrowed. And you're texting old friends now? While carrying my child. She stood from the bed, calm but alert. It was nothing inappropriate. That's not the point, he snapped, tossing the phone onto the bed. You didn't tell me about him. Because there was nothing to tell, Chad. Are you lying to me? I'm not. He stepped closer. You think I'm stupid? No. I think you're angry. You're damn right I'm angry. His voice cracked through the room like a whip. She didn't flinch, but her hands clenched slightly at her sides. I've been working myself into the ground to build something for us, and you're out here, reminiscing with some architect. Her heart pounded. He was just checking in. That's it. And you didn't think I deserved to know? I didn't think I needed permission. That broke something in him. With a sharp motion, he swept the lamp off the nightstand. Crashed to the floor, shattering on impact. Before she could react, his hand shot out and clamped around the base of her neck. It wasn't a push or a warning, it was a grip. His fingers pressed into her skin, cutting off the space she needed to breathe. Her eyes widened. You think you can play me? He snarled, his other hand striking across her cheek in one quick, ugly snap of motion. The sound echoed through the room. Not loud, but final. She staggered back, the sting blooming instantly across her face. He released her neck and shoved her hard. She crashed into the edge of the dresser, shoulder hitting wood, the impact ringing up through her collarbone. She gasped, clutching her stomach, instinctively vision blurring. Chad, stop, she cried. You're going to hurt the baby. The sound of her voice broke through to him. He froze mid-step, horror dawning across his face, as if he'd only just realized what he'd done. She backed toward the hallway, trembling, one hand over her stomach, the other touching her cheek where a red mark was already rising. She kept her eyes on him like he was a stranger. I'm leaving, she said quietly. No, you're not, he whispered, voice cracking. I am. She grabbed her purse, coat, duffel, whatever her hands could reach. She didn't slam the door. She didn't look back. By the time he reached the hallway, she was gone. Only the sound of the elevator echoed. Somewhere below. He stood in the doorway, palms shaking, staring at the empty space where she had been. What did I just do? He murmured. But there was no answer, only the quiet and a shattered lamp at his feet. Amara didn't go far that night. She ended up at Serena's apartment. Small, warm, filled with stacks of vinyl records and mismatched furniture. Serena opened the door, her face still shiny from removing makeup, and froze when she saw the mark on Amara's cheek. Amara, her voice dropped. What happened? Amara shook her head, tears stinging her eyes. I couldn't stay. Not after tonight. Serena reached out gently, tilting her chin. The faint red swelling told its own story. She didn't need an explanation. That bastard, she whispered. He swore to me he'd never. He shoved me. Amara interrupted, her voice trembling. I hit the dresser. I thought she stopped, one hand instinctively pressing to her stomach. I thought he was going to take everything from me. Serena's chest rose sharply. You're not going back. Not now. Not ever. Amara sat on the couch, shoulders shaking, coat still wrapped tight around her. Serena brought a cold cloth and pressed it gently against her cheek. The sting made her flinch, but she didn't pull away. "You're safe here," Serena said. "He won't touch you again. Not while I'm breathing." Minutes later, the phone rang. Serena glanced at the screen. Chad. She silenced it. It rang again, and again. She let it buzz until it stopped. When it finally went quiet, Serena turned back to Amara. "He'll come crawling, pretending he's sorry. That's how he works. He'll cry, he'll beg, he'll talk about stress and love and how it'll never happen again. And if you go back, Amara, he'll only hit harder next time." Amara's lip trembled. "I wanted to believe he wasn't my father. That he was different." "He's not," Serena said flatly. "And you don't owe him the chance to prove it." Amara leaned back, head in her hands. "I don't even know where to start." "You already did. You left." The next morning, Chad showed up at Serena's door. His knock wasn't loud, but it carried weight. Amara froze on the couch, clutching her coat tighter. Around her, Serena stood, jaw clenched, and opened the door just enough to step outside. "What did you do to her?" she hissed. Chad's eyes were bloodshot. His hair, usually immaculate, was messy. "I lost it. I didn't mean to. Serena, I swear." "You put your hands on her." He swallowed. "I love her. I was angry. You hit her." He looked down. "I didn't mean." "Stop. You don't get to spin this." Serena's voice was low and fierce. "You're my brother, but she's under my protection now. And if you so much as text her without her permission, I'll call the police myself." His eyes flashed. "You'd turn on me?" Serena didn't blink. "You turned on yourself the second you touched her." For the first time, Chad looked small. He pressed a hand to his face, shook his head, and muttered, "Tell her I'm sorry, please." Serena shut the door. Inside, Amara sat with her knees pulled close, eyes wide. "What did he say?" she asked softly. Serena sat beside her, pulling her close. "He said sorry, but it doesn't matter, because you're not going back." Amara rested her head against Serena's shoulder, tears slipping silently. For the first time in a long time, she let herself be held without fear. The guest room in Serena's apartment was small, barely big enough for the daybed and a dresser that leaned slightly to one side. But for Amara it felt like sanctuary. She sat propped against the pillows, one hand pressed gently to her cheek where the swelling still lingered, the other resting on her stomach. The room was quiet, save for the hum of the old radiator and Serena moving about in the kitchen. And then she felt it, a flutter, subtle, almost like the brush of a feather against her insides. Her breath caught. She froze, then pressed her hand harder against her stomach. Another faint kick. Her eyes flooded instantly. "You're here," she whispered through tears. "You're really here." It wasn't just proof of life. It was proof of herself. She hadn't imagined the strength she'd felt that night when she walked out the door. The child inside her had answered back, with movement, with presence, with possibility. For the first time in weeks, the fear loosened its grip on her chest. Later, Serena peeked in. She saw Amara wiping her face and tried to smile. "You okay?" Amara nodded, but her voice broke. The baby kicked. Serena's eyes widened. She hurried in, sitting on the edge of the bed, hands clasped over her mouth. "Already?" Amara nodded again, tears streaming. "I thought I was going to lose everything last night. But this..." She placed Serena's hand gently over her stomach. "This is what I still have." Serena's jaw trembled. "That little one just told you what I've been saying. You're stronger than you think." They sat there in silence, Serena's hand still resting over her belly, both of them listening for another flutter. That night, Amara opened her journal. Her handwriting was shaky, but determined. "You kicked today. You reminded me you're fighting too. I promise I will never let you feel the fear I grew up in. You will not hide in closets. You will not wonder if love means bruises. You are my reason. You are my freedom. And one day you'll know. Leaving was how I loved you first. She set the pen down, exhaling. Her reflection in the dark window showed the faint mark still rising on her cheek. But her hand on her belly made the image different. Not just a woman running, a mother standing. When she finally drifted to sleep, she dreamt of her child. Not faceless, not vague, but clear. Enough to see a smile that didn't carry the weight of fear. For the first time in years, the dream wasn't about survival. It was about future. The apartment Amara found was nothing like the one she had shared with Chad. No skyline view, no sleek furniture, no curated art on the walls. Just a one-bedroom with creaky floors, thin curtains, and a leaky faucet that dripped whenever it wanted. And yet, it was hers. The first night she slept there, surrounded by boxes and silence, she lay awake staring at the cracked ceiling. For once, the quiet didn't feel like punishment. It felt like possibility. She woke up the next morning to sunlight spilling across the room. No footsteps pacing in the hallway. No phone vibrating with demands. No tension filling the air before words were even spoken. Just morning. She made tea in an old chipped mug, sat cross-legged on the floor, and whispered to herself, "This is mine." Adjusting wasn't easy. Nights were long. Fear still clung to her at times, creeping in whenever she heard a knock at the door or footsteps too close to her window. But each day, she carved something small back for herself. She hung pictures of her mother and her younger self on the fridge. She bought a soft rug for the living room. She let herself play music again while cooking. And slowly, she began to breathe without waiting for permission. Therapy helped too. The counselor's office was small, warm, filled with books and a lavender diffuser. At first, Amara didn't know what to say. She sat stiffly, hands folded, staring at the clock. But the therapist didn't push. She just asked one question. When was the last time you felt like yourself? Amara had to close her eyes to even imagine it. Her voice cracked when she whispered, "Before him." Week by week, she unpacked more. The guilt, the fear, the patterns she'd inherited from her childhood home. "You don't owe anyone your silence," the therapist reminded her. The words landed like stones finally set down. Her mother called often, sometimes crying, sometimes quiet. "You're braver than I was," she told Amara during one call. "I stayed. You didn't." Amara pressed the phone to her ear, tears slipping down her face. "I'm not brave. I'm just trying." "That is brave," her mother insisted. And for the first time, Amara believed her. She built small routines. Evening walks by the lake, journaling before bed, checking her growing belly in the mirror and smiling at the roundness that meant life. One night, she caught her reflection and didn't see a victim anymore. She saw a woman who had left. And in that reflection, she finally recognized herself again. The hospital room was dim, the only light coming from a small lamp near the bed. Hours had blurred into one another. Contractions, nurses, the sound of her own breath pushing through the pain. And then suddenly it was there. A cry. Sharp, alive, demanding the world to notice. Her daughter. The nurse placed the tiny bundle against Amara's chest, skin warm, heartbeat fluttering like a bird's wing. Tears came instantly, streaming down Amara's face as she whispered over and over, "You're safe now. You're safe." The baby's fingers curled around her own. So small, so impossibly strong. In that moment, everything shifted. The bruises, the fear, the nights of silence. All of it faded. Behind the weight of this new beginning, she wasn't just surviving anymore. She was mothering. Serena burst through the door minutes later, her eyes wet before she even reached the bed. "Let me see her," she whispered. Amara lifted the blanket gently, revealing a face still red and scrunched from crying. Serena gasped, covering her mouth. "She's perfect." "She is," Amara said softly. Serena leaned down and kissed her forehead. "You did it. You really did it." Amara smiled weakly. We did. I couldn't have walked out without you. Serena shook her head. You walked yourself out. I just held the door open. 2 days later, as Amara sat propped up in the hospital bed, a bouquet appeared in the doorway. Not the kind Chad used to send, not curated, not rehearsed. Just wildflowers, slightly uneven, tied with twine. Isaiah followed behind them, shifting nervously in the hall. Is this okay? He asked. Amara nodded, surprised but warmed. Come in. He stepped inside, placing the flowers on the table, then pausing at the foot of the bed. His eyes softened as they landed on the baby. May I? He asked. Amara hesitated for only a moment before nodding. Isaiah moved carefully, as if holding something sacred, and cradled the baby in his arms. His large hands looked almost too big around her tiny body, but the gentleness with which he moved erased any doubt. She's beautiful, he whispered. Looks just like her mother. Amara's throat tightened. He looked up then, meeting her eyes. There was no pity in his expression, no pressure, no demand, just quiet respect. You don't owe me a thing, he said softly. I just wanted to see you happy. Amara swallowed hard, unable to speak. Isaiah placed the baby back in her arms and stepped back, hands sliding into his pockets. I'll go, he said. Didn't mean to intrude. You didn't, Amara replied quickly. And as he left, she felt something stir in her chest. Not romance, not yet, but the recognition of what safety could feel like again. That night, as her daughter slept against her chest, Amara whispered the vow her mother once whispered to her. It ends with me. And this time she knew she meant it. The days after bringing her daughter home were a blur of sleepless nights and small victories. Bottles stacked on the counter, laundry folded one-handed while rocking the baby, lullabies hummed off-key in the quiet hours. It was exhausting, but it was hers. And in every midnight feeding, in every first smile, Amara found pieces of herself stitched back together. Isaiah didn't hover. He never asked for space that wasn't freely given. But he showed up when it mattered. When her sink wouldn't stop leaking, he arrived with a toolbox. This one's on me, he said, kneeling on the floor until the steady drip finally silenced. When she forgot groceries, he dropped off a bag filled with basics: bread, milk, fruit. Architects are good at planning ahead, he joked. And when the baby wouldn't sleep, he came by with a stack of children's books, his deep voice turning each page into something calm and steady. Amara watched him one night, her daughter curled peacefully against his chest while he read, softly under the lamp. The image was so ordinary, so gentle, that her throat ached with emotion. This wasn't the firestorm she'd once mistaken for love. This was quieter, surer, the kind of love that didn't demand, the kind that didn't bruise, the kind that asked nothing but gave everything. One evening, after Isaiah left, Amara stood by the window with her daughter in her arms. The city lights flickered in the distance. You're going to grow up knowing this, she whispered to her baby. The kind of love that doesn't make you small. She kissed the child's forehead, smiling through tears. For the first time, she wasn't just surviving. She was building. Weeks later, Isaiah stopped by again. He brought no groceries this time, no books, no tools, just himself. They sat together on the couch, the baby asleep in her bassinet nearby. I know you're still healing, he said quietly. I won't rush that, but I want you to know something. Amara looked at him, heart steady but curious. You're not broken, he said, and you don't have to keep proving your strength. You're allowed to just be. Her eyes filled, but this time not with fear, with recognition. Because maybe, just maybe, a new kind of love was possible after all. The courthouse was colder than she expected. Not the temperature, the atmosphere. Marble walls, echoing footsteps, the shuffle of papers, the low hum of lawyers murmuring to clients. Everything about it felt designed to strip people down to procedure. But for Amara, this wasn't just paperwork. It was survival. She sat at the long wooden table, her lawyer beside her, her daughter asleep in a stroller behind. Every time she glanced back, the small rise and fall of her baby's chest reminded her why she was here, why she couldn't waver. Across the room sat Chad. His suit was sharp as always, but his posture wasn't. Shoulders slouched, jaw tight, eyes ringed with sleeplessness. For the first time since she'd met him, he didn't look untouchable. He looked diminished. He didn't glance at her at first. He stared at the table, at the papers in front of him. But when his lawyer leaned down to whisper something, his eyes flicked up, met hers. The look wasn't anger. It wasn't charm. It was something closer to disbelief, like he still couldn't process that she had actually left, that she had made it all the way here. When the judge entered, everyone stood. The proceedings began. The lawyer spoke first, formal and direct. This is a petition for dissolution of marriage on grounds of irreconcilable differences, supported by testimony regarding domestic abuse. The words hung in the air like a spotlight. Chad shifted in his chair, his jaw tightening. Amara didn't flinch. Her lawyer guided her through the testimony. Questions about her leaving, about the night she fled, about the bruise still visible in photos she'd brought as evidence. Each answer was clear, steady. Not because she wasn't shaking inside, but because she refused to let fear have the microphone anymore. Then it was Chad's turn. His lawyer argued stress, argued pressure, argued that it had been an isolated incident. Finally, the judge looked directly at Chad. Do you have anything to say for yourself? For the first time since she'd known him, Chad seemed to search for words and come up empty. He looked at her, at the faint mark that had taken weeks to fade, at the child in the stroller. Behind her, his mouth opened, then closed. When he finally spoke, his voice was low. I didn't mean to hurt her, but I did. The judge nodded. And that's why this ends today. The gavel struck. Final. Binding. Her marriage was over. As Amara rose, her legs trembled, but not from weakness. From release. She turned toward the exit, her daughter's stroller rolling beside her. Chad muttered as she passed, barely audible. You'll regret this. She stopped, looked at him. No, she said softly, her voice steady as stone. I'll survive this. And with that, she walked out into the crisp Chicago air, papers in hand, her baby bundled safely against her chest. The lakefront had always been her refuge. As a child, she came here with her mother on rare calm days, the two of them sitting in silence. As the water stretched endlessly before them, back then the waves felt like promises, proof that something bigger than shouting and slammed doors existed. Now, years later, she sat on a worn wooden bench with her daughter bundled in a soft blanket against her chest. The late afternoon sun dipped low, scattering golden light across the water. Each ripple shimmered like hope refusing to die. She breathed deeply. For the first time in months, it didn't hurt to fill her lungs. Footsteps approached. Slow, deliberate, familiar. Mind if I sit? Amara looked up. Isaiah stood there, hands in his coat pockets, waiting for her permission. She nodded, and he eased down beside her. For a moment, neither of them spoke. They just listened to the water, to the gulls, to the small sounds of the baby shifting softly in sleep. Finally, Isaiah broke the silence. Court today. She nodded. It's done. He studied her profile. How do you feel? She exhaled, the breath carrying both exhaustion and release. Lighter, not healed, not whole, but free. A small smile tugged at his lips. Free is a good start. They sat again in quiet, the kind of quiet that doesn't demand filling. The kind that feels like a shared language. Amara turned slightly, studying him. You always show up right when I need air. He chuckled softly. Maybe I just know what it looks like when someone's drowning. She tilted her head, curious. And do I look like that? Not anymore. His gaze was steady. Now you look like someone who finally came up for breath. Her eyes stung. She turned back toward the water, blinking fast. Isaiah let the moment rest before speaking again. His voice was careful, measured. Amara, maybe one day we'll finish the story we started. Her lips curved, fragile but real. Maybe. But I'm not rushing anymore. He nodded. I wouldn't want you to. The baby stirred then, a tiny whimper breaking the stillness. Amara rocked gently, humming. Under her breath, Isaiah leaned closer, watching the child settle again. She's strong, he said. She has to be. No, he corrected softly. She gets to be. Because she has you. Amara's throat tightened. She looked down at her daughter, then back at Isaiah, and for the first time in years, she allowed herself to believe tomorrow might actually hold something worth waiting for. The park was quiet that evening, the kind of quiet that comes when families pack up after long afternoons and the air cools enough to invite reflection. Amara spread a small blanket across the grass near the lake. Her daughter, now just beginning to toddle, wobbled unsteadily toward the edge of the blanket, fists clenched with determination. Careful, sweetheart, Amara called softly, rising to her knees. The little girl turned back and grinned, 2 teeth showing, before plopping down and giggling at her own unsteady landing. Amara laughed too, the sound lighter than it had been in years. Isaiah watched from the bench nearby, sketchbook in his lap, pencil moving idly. He didn't interrupt, didn't hover. He simply watched the small family scene unfold, his presence steady as the ground beneath them. Amara's eyes softened as she looked at her daughter. The child's curls framed her face like a crown, her cheeks flushed from play. She was whole, untouched by the shadows that had haunted Amara's own childhood. That was the victory. Not walking away from Chad. Not winning in court. Not even reclaiming her freedom. The true victory was watching her child live without fear. As the little girl picked up a stick and began drawing crooked lines in the dirt, Amara whispered, more to herself than anyone else. She'll never inherit my scars. The words were no longer a desperate plea. They were a declaration. Her daughter looked up at the sound of her voice and babbled something back. The syllables, half-formed, sweet and nonsensical. But Amara understood the message anyway. She crawled closer, pulling the child into her lap. The baby rested her head against Amara's chest, tiny fingers grabbing at her necklace. Amara pressed a kiss to her curls. You'll never have to wonder if love is safe. Not while I'm here. The sun dipped lower, painting the sky in streaks of pink and gold. Isaiah closed his sketchbook and walked over, crouching beside them. She's got your smile, he said softly. Amara looked down at her daughter and smiled wider. Then she's going to be okay. Isaiah's eyes met hers, steady and full of quiet promise. For the first time, Amara didn't look away. As the evening air grew cooler, she wrapped the blanket around her daughter and stood. The lake stretched endlessly before them, reflecting the glow of the setting sun. Amara inhaled deeply, holding her child close, and whispered again, this time for the world to hear. Love doesn't mean staying. Sometimes it means surviving. Her daughter cooed in her arms, eyes heavy with sleep, and with every step toward home, Amara knew she had given her the greatest gift possible. A life where love was not bruises. A life where laughter could grow. A life where safety was the root of everything. I didn't just walk away. I walked toward a future worth living. Family, if the story moved you, don't just click away quietly. Drop a comment below. Tell us where in the world you're watching from, or share your thoughts. Your words may be the lifeline someone else needs today. If you're still here, hit that like button right now. It's the simplest way to help this story reach more hearts. And don't forget to subscribe and tap the bell so you never miss our next story. We're one big family here. Until next time, stay safe, stay strong, and never forget your worth.